Mishka Shurbali is catching up with friends who are arguably more talented than him.
I find that people always say the best shit off mic, and then as soon as you hit record, people are like, they just clam right up. But we do in solidarity with our brothers and sisters in Ukraine, we are foregoing any edits. We're doing a editing sort of austerity program here. So I'm just going to do I'm going to read from my brain a bio for you that I remember just from our conversations and whatnot.
Far out. All right.
Ben Schafer is an editor at DeCapo, which is now part of Hachette.
Hachette Books. DeCapo is no more in name.
Man, I muffed the first biggest part of your bio.
It's okay.
And you've been working as an editor for 20 years?
I've been working as an editor since 94, actually. So that's 28 years.
So
I think. I think that's 28, right?
Holy so I'm crap. 0 for 2 now. You've been the editor for books by Gregory Corso, Doug Stanhope, and our beloved Mark Lanegan.
Two out of 3 there. Not Corso, Allen Ginsberg.
I thought you did a book with Gregory Corso.
I did a book with Herbert Huncke.
Where did I get Corso from? He's another beat.
I did know him very, very well, but I never did a book project with him.
And I think you gave me a copy of the Herbert Huncke book.
Probably, yeah.
I have you gave me a couple of Trouble Boys, the Replacements book, which I started, and then something in my life caught fire, and I didn't finish. And I also have a copy of The Mayor of McDougal Street, the Dave Van book, which you gave me a copy of, and then something caught fire.
I love that book.
So welcome to my bullshit podcast, where we will try to correct all the misinformation I just sent out into the universe.
It's cool, man.
How are you doing today, man?
I'm good. It's the end of a work day. I'm here in West Hollywood. It's 3:00. I get up early. I work, Hachette Books is in New York, so I live on an East Coast schedule. So, I'm like an old guy. I have dinner at 4:30 and things like that. So this is towards the end of my day wrapping up, wherein I will now struggle to stay awake till 9. And this will help.
I'm loving the 55 plus early bird menu part of my life that I'm moving into now. A friend of mine had a micro party last night, and it started at like 9, and I went to it in my pajamas so that there would be a streamlined. So I would have both an excuse to get out of there, like, whoa, shit, I didn't realize I'm in my pajamas, and then I could come home and just like walk straight into bed, and
no doubt,
and fall down.
One of the best things about being 50, I'm turning 50 in 5 days, and one of the best things is getting over that fear of missing out. Bullshit,
Lucia Berlin was one of my teachers when I was at the University of Colorado, and man, I still miss the shit out of her. We were talking once about, I think we were talking about my drinking or going out. She was like, "What did you do last night?" And I was like, "Oh, I fell into a hedge or something." I was like, "What did you do last night?" And she was like, I was out having dinner with friends, and I was having a perfectly delightful time. And then I thought about my bed, and then I went home. And at the time, I felt like she was speaking a foreign language. That I was like, and now I think about oftentimes I think about my bed.
Things change for sure.
Well, let's talk about Lanegan a little bit. I mean, we have many things to talk about.
Sure.
I feel like you and I have been podcasting since we met. We have these awesome sort of sustained conversations about life and art and literature and survival. And the but one of the ways in which we got to know each other was, well, I knew of you because you were sort of Stanhope's evil editor at the the Man in the High Tower, when he was doing his book. And then you and I met in person for the first time when when we were sort of agitating, annoying Lanegan into finally writing Sing Backwards and Weep. And we've stayed friends. How is your grieving process going?
Well, it's a daily thing. It goes through phases and stages, like everything else, I guess. I still find it hard to believe. I don't know that I've accepted that I won't see him sing again in particular. I saw him play numerous times, and it was always really great, and always really memorable. It's a big part of my life. And, I've seen my last Lanegan show, and that's that's awful. I think about losing Lou Reed and Bowie and people like that. And these people who have, helped you, the universal you, me, I guess, and lots of people, understand how we are feeling and feel less alone in life because their music kept us company. I guess it's part of getting older too, but it doesn't make it, any less sad. I've known my whole life that eventually there'll be a time when all these people are gone, and then I'll be gone. But I guess it's just how it is. But it's a terribly sad thing, and it's not like we can't listen to the work he left behind, and there's a lot of it. But especially the last really since 2012, I guess it's Blues Funeral Forward, I've gotten used to a very steady stream of his great work, coming, whether his own albums or solo album, Lanegan Band, other collaborations, and they've come to a halt, it's just very sad. What are you going to do? I think we both know he wasn't anywhere near finished with his life's work. I knew he was the kind of guy who was going to continue doing it up to the last minute. I just didn't think the last minute was coming when it did.
Stanhope has a bit from years ago, talking about Kurt Cobain, and he says, "Oh, everybody says his death was so tragic. Maybe he was just out of shit." And and that's the thing with Lanegan is that we have scientific documentation. We have every kind of proof that he wasn't out of shit. One of the things I said to him that when we were sort of talking about, because I was sort of posing the theoretical question to him of like, does one run out of songs, or does one, because I've been writing the same song over and over again since I was 17. And I sort of tiptoed around this with him, and then finally I just sort of like slid into it broadside because there's no way to say it, and I said, I mean this as a compliment, but I feel like you're moving out of your sort of like masculine power as a songwriter and into your hag power, which is to say that there was something timeless and fucking paranormal, like supernatural about his work. And he said, "Thank you. I totally understand that." Which is good. I can probably count them at the amount of times when he and I understood each other perfectly on one hand.
I think you're right. I think there really was something otherworldly about the later work, in particular on the album Straight Songs of Sorrow, like the first song, I Wouldn't Want to Say, didn't sound like anything he'd ever done before to to me. And the point of the view and the singer in that song is almost coming from the other side somewhat, spooky.
Yeah, it's funny to think now about, his voice, coming from the other side, because when he was alive, his voice was coming from the other side,
Sure.
that was something that was, so powerful for us. And one of the things that I feel too about his death, like losing, I started listening to Velvet Underground when I was 15 or 16. And I started listening to David Bowie before that. But those artists never, they felt like ours, or maybe like my dad's, or like my older cousins, or the cooler kids. But
right
but there was something about Lanegan that his work, to me, it always felt like mine. It feels like it doesn't feel just like losing a friend or losing an artist, but it's sort of like, oh, did you hear Running Water died? Or did you hear Sunshine died? Or, that like a force of nature, like something elemental,
Yeah.
So yeah, it's I haven't been listening to music like at all. Just because like I can't bear to. I was driving home one night and I was upset, and I was like, well, maybe now I'll throw on Old Swan from Gargoyle.
Gargoyle, sure.
And just have a good like high speed cry. And I was like, no, I'm not ready.
That's interesting. The only song I've listened really by Mark is from the very last album, Dark Market Skeleton Joe. The song Lost Animals. It's a really, really beautiful song, and it's like a summation of his life. And it seems almost to be like a statement of intent as to what he planned on doing with the rest of it.
Yeah.
He's, I'm just going to stand on this stage until the curtain falls, basically. The curtain was falling sooner than we thought, but that's what it says. And it's like a recitation, and it's a really fucking heartbreaking song. That's the only one I've played. That's interesting you say that about music. I find myself, I've only, I think, and I don't know if this is a coincidence, I've only been listening to like ambient music since he died. I think it's because I work with words all day. I can't take lyrics that much. I have to put on Brian Eno and those instrumental Daniel Lanois records, or Philip Glass, something that's like really repetitive. I don't want to say background music because it's not, but it kind of is, but not in a bad way. You know what I mean?
There was an album I discovered in the late 90s that was, I think it's just called Musique. I'll have to dig out a link and send it to you. So if you like the Eno Lanois stuff, you'll dig that as well. I think Eric Bachman from Archers of Loaf, I feel like he made an instrumental album that I really enjoyed around that time too.
Cool.
I can't write while listening to music either. I remember reading a thing about Stephen King, blasting like Kid Rock and Eminem, when he
moans.
While he's writing I'm not sure he's blasting Kid Rock nowadays, but I've enjoyed some Kid Rock music. I don't give a shit. I think he's a garbage person, but that's not how we choose the artist we pick to listen to or to enjoy. And like if I hear a Kid Rock song on the radio, fuck it, I'll turn it up. I don't care.
I was annoyed with him from the get-go because in the earliest song that I remember was where he called himself the Bull God. And I was like, no, the Bull God is Dave Weindorf from Monster Magnet. Damn it. It's not you, Kid Rock.
You can't, is Kid Rock also the real Slim Shady? I feel like he's been a fucking poser since day one, but I'm sure that will get people angry at me. What are you working on right now, or are you at liberty to share with us what you're working on right now?
Yeah, I mean the stuff that it has just gone, say, in, to copy it. We have a really great, pretty major Chuck Berry biography coming from the great writer R.J. Smith, who wrote a really terrific biography of James Brown, and also a biography of the photographer Robert Frank. And this is his next book, and it's a really, really brilliant, well researched biography of Chuck Berry, but also the world that made him. A lot about St. Louis and how that shaped who he was, because he was a complicated guy. I mean, underrated as a writer, a great lyricist. I mean, short stories in those songs, but a guy with some interesting tastes, I guess we could say. Well, not even interesting, kind of freaky,
Chuck Berry was one of my gateway drugs to rock and roll. I mean, I was really like, I remember hearing Johnny Be Good and just being like, Mom, Dad, fuck your dreams. Like, this is it. In
some ways it never got better than that, in a way.
I peaked early at about like 6 with the tennis racket on my bouncing on my sister's bed, but I have a red 335 right here that is, directly, and I would draw a direct line to that from, hearing Chuck Berry 40 years ago or something like that. Did you read the article on James Brown or about James Brown playing Rikers Island that was in New York Times recently?
No, I didn't see that. I must have missed that somehow.
The great, really cool story there. And I watched the biography on him, or the biopic that came out a couple of years ago, and they talk about, there was like a contractual thing with Little Richard had been hired to play somewhere, and he wasn't going to show up, and the promoter was terrified as to what was going to happen. So James Brown did the gig in like pancake makeup, and that's where, and that was sort of the birth of James Brown, because that's where he got all the
far out,
the falsetto stuff, was the was basically being a Little Richard cover band. But that's a story that we see again and again in rock and roll and writing and stuff like that. I mean, the Beatles were a Chuck Berry cover band.
Yeah, and
it's all about misinterpretation and and starting the podcast with bad information. That's but I mean, that seems to be how a lot of artists evolve. Is
like, you have to learn the idiom first, I guess, before you do your own thing in it, or put your own spin on it, I guess.
Yeah,
everyone starts out imitating to some degree, I would think.
Yeah, the and I'm gonna have to go back now and look at Chuck Berry songs and sort of try and like diagram them and stuff like that, because I remember it being like sort of very Tin Pan Alley influenced, narrative driven songs, very formulaic, where there's the turnaround in the third verse or the third chorus. But yeah, Chuck Berry was a hell of a writer.
Oh yeah, there's so much detail in so few words, setting and characters and what the room looks like, I mean, everything. Yeah, he worked very hard at it. He was really, really conscious that way. That's just the first book that came to mind, because it's the one kind of I was most recently working on. I just don't want to not mention someone and bum them out if they happen to find this podcast. I'm just qualifying that,
While we're on the subject of bumming people out, I said something in the last podcast that I think is going to go up tomorrow that I already want to walk back. And, we were, I was talking to Alec Bemis, who you would love, the founder of Brassland record label.
I know who he is.
The National, and great dude. And I didn't really realize this because I've been up to my own shit, but in the last couple of years with Sing Backwards and Weep coming out, he went hard on Lanegan's work, and read the book and enjoyed it so much that then he was like, oh my God, this is an artist I missed. So he's had that archaeological pleasure of sort of discovering your new favorite artist in your mid 40s.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
You know, and then getting to sort of go back and unearth all that stuff. And we were talking about Lanegan on the mic, and I said that the thing about Lanegan's voice, you know, you and I talked about this, you know, Lanegan is an interpreter of other people's music, and his voice took up so much space that any song that he sang became a Lanegan song, you know?
Sure.
And I was talking to Alec about it, and I said one of the frustrating things about Mark, and one of the maddening things about sort of remembering him, is that sometimes when he was on the mic, you know, when he opened his mouth, he was in conversation with the divine, you know, he was speaking directly to the muse. And other times it was a different master, you know, that he absolutely served two masters, you know, addiction and creation. But I think where I got it wrong, though, is that in his life, I don't know, tell me if I'm wrong here, that I feel like in his life there were times where he was serving his illness and not his art. But I think where I got it wrong is that when he was on the mic, he was always speaking to the muse.
I think so. You know, I never saw him turn in a bad show. And not only that, I never heard him hit a bad note. I mean, the amount of microtonal control that he had over his voice, he was always in tune, you know? I never saw him waver off. I never saw him forget a lyric. So I should say though, I think the first time I saw him was 2003. You know, I didn't come to him through Screaming Trees. I barely had heard them. I'd heard a couple of their singles and that was it. I first heard him when I saw him sing with Queens of the Stone Age at Roseland in New York City, 2003, 2004, somewhere around there, and was completely like, whoa, who's that? Because he was so powerful that he'd come out and throw down some darkness and then walk off before the song was over. It was for someone who didn't move much, it was incredibly theatrical in a way, you know? And the voice that came out of him, I didn't know. I remember asking someone next to me, I was like, who is that? You know? I mean, the voice instantly grabbed me, you know? And it was kind of like talked about otherworldly. We talked about that. It was kind of some kind of summoning, you know, from the depths somewhere, you know? And yeah, he did have I could tell by looking at him that he'd been through some shit, you know, at that point. He was pretty thin then too, you know, and he had a countenance, you know, that generally can only be traced to, you know, certain things, you know, that we've all come in contact with. And the whole presentation was just incredible, you know. And I guess so I went backwards from Bubblegum. I don't think Bubblegum was out yet. I think maybe Here Comes That Will Chill had just come out.
That's another great album.
In the EP, and then maybe or maybe they were both out. It's hard to remember. It's been
I feel like they both came out around the same time.
It was around the same time. So and so I got to go backwards, and then you had to track things down a little bit more back than the Sub Pop records, you know, kind of in reverse. Listen, which there was already a body of you know, solo records then. Winding Sheet and I'll Take Care of You and Scraps at Midnight and Field Songs. Field Songs was probably my favorite. And each one of them, I was like, how is it I've never heard of this person? You know, like you were saying earlier, that belongs to us. Maybe he feels that way more than Lou Reed and Bob Dylan, just because Lou Reed and David Bowie. Dylan's still here. Knock on. That's gonna be another tough one, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, he's 80. Shit. But maybe because, you know, Mark wasn't nearly as celebrated on a wide scale as they were, you know. Never had a hit single, you know, there was never the big Rolling Stone profile, which there should have been all along, you know.
Yeah.
Because there was just such a body of work. And I like the Screaming Trees, but I have to say I don't listen to them that much. I think Dust might be my favorite record of theirs. But I mostly concentrated on Mark's solo work. So
The last podcast I drew a pretty hard line between Screaming Trees fans and Mark Lanegan fans. I was like, we are not the same.
I do everything back. I'm not like a guy with his finger on the pulse. I just hear things and like them. Like I got into Twilight Singers. Speaking of Mark's people, I heard the Twilight Singers before I heard the Afghan Wigs. Even though I lived in Indianapolis, where I grew up, down the street from the patio where the Afghan Wigs played all the time, and my brother was the bouncer, was a doorman there. I had no, and I like the Afghan Wigs too. But sometimes you just like what you heard first the most, because that's where you had that first connection. So I was, loyal to I like the Twilight Singers records. To me, were more dynamic and more dynamic in a way.
One of the things I think about when when you talk about seeing him live and him just sort of having so much, having this performative immobility of him just standing there and that being enough. I think about one of the things that I learned, when I first got sober, which I think it may also be, a thing from the program, of when you have a bad feeling, just sit in it, until it goes away. Don't stop trying to escape things.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a good metaphor or a good analogy, with Lanegan, is that he grew very comfortable at sort of like just sitting in the flames or sitting in the block of ice, or, it's,
I think a lot of Mark's fans have had struggles, with substance. Just looking around at the audience, and a lot of his fans who I've talked to, gravitated towards his music because you listened to it and you knew you were listening to someone who understood, or gave some kind of voice to it, or could even, if you're in the midst of it, help keep your nose above water, at least, maybe till you get to land, hopefully down the road,
Yeah, there was something about his, the music, the lyrics, his voice, all of it together, some other ineffable, undescribable thing, where, they weren't necessarily comforting songs, but but they provided me with a tremendous amount of comfort.
Yes.
It was sort of like being enveloped in the warmth of another human being's suffering. The simpatico thing of, if you're in hell and you have one friend, at least you're not alone.
Oh, indeed. To me, they weren't sad. There's people that say dark music, sad music. They were what happens after sadness. When you not I don't mean extra sad or like super sad. I mean a sense of resignation, in a way, of as you said, being comfortable living in the darkness, and perhaps to a degree accepting one's fate.
Yeah. I was talking to somebody about the pandemic, about shutdown, about the last 2 hellish years, and sort of my public trials, and sort of the communal suffering versus my own private hell. I told them, I was like, I've come as close to relapse as I could ever imagine, and I didn't. And that means that I'm stronger than I thought I was, and also weaker. I think that's in part what you're describing, of this sort of the wave of sadness crashes and then it recedes, and what's left there on the shore, so there, maybe some resignation, maybe some acceptance, some, some resolute thing, and And also too, like when the worst thing that you can imagine happens to you and it doesn't kill you, then you're like, huh, all
I
right.
can survive this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what's next? Now that the thing that we have feared the most, has happened to us, and it didn't destroy us, or it didn't destroy me. Well, what now? That there is a gift there, because then you can look on to the future and say, well, what does the future hold?
Yeah, for
The
sure.
What brought you? What was your Chuck Berry? What was your gateway drug to editing the books that you have? Because I was thinking about the books that you've worked on, and I feel like they do have the stamp of your hand. Not to say that they're samey, but that you are sort of curating a body of work of the writers you work with and the artists you work with. That it is sort of like, I too have survived music, or something like that. Is that a fair assessment? Or
Yeah, I think it is. With the books I've signed up and published in the years I've been working at publishing, I'm not necessarily gravitating towards the biggest celebrity or the most famous person there. I think some of it's instinct, but a lot of it is doing books by people who will have readers who have a very strong sense of identification with the subject of the book, or with the author of the book, if it happens to be the artist themselves. I'm trying to get him or herself or whatever. And I sometimes I'll make the joke, that I'll do books for people who dress like the music they listen to. How you can. That's why I've done a lot of punk rock books and a lot of metal books. How sometimes you can spot a metal fan or a punk rock fan just by looking at them. It's just a fact, because
absolutely.
They're wearing the shirt, they're wearing the uniform. And I was that kind of person. In some ways, I still very much am that kind of person, So, and I always figure, well, if someone's going to, express their, allegiance in their clothing that way, there's a good chance they might come to a book too, and that kind of book can exist on its own terms, whether or not it gets enough press, or whether or not NPR decides to do something about it. You know what I mean? Whether or not at least a certain group of people will come to it and, make it a viable endeavor for a publishing company, because you want the books to succeed. You don't want to do all that work and have, just crickets, which happens too, of course, So it's been a lot of, for that reason, it's been a lot of punk rock books or metal books or alternative, which is seems like an even more antiquated term, something like that. But I think they all have readers who they don't just listen to the music for fun.
Right. People have a lot more skin in the game.
They need it. I'm the same way, man. I wouldn't understand probably any of my emotions if I didn't have a song to attach them to. If there wasn't a song that put it in some way that, that I could relate to. Shit, I feel like that too. I know exactly what she's singing about there. Holy crap. I mean, like Lou Reed said earlier, Lou Reed said, I'm just want to make music so people won't feel so alone, and that's in part why he wrote. And I think that makes total sense. It might all start with him in a certain way, him and Dylan, these kind of, smart guys who are kind of mean also. I immediately liked them, and wanted to come to New York because of them. It was definitely like the Velvet Underground. When the first time I heard them, it was like my brain was waiting to hear them. It was like, oh man, it just latched right on. Like, that's exactly what I want music to sound like, And in the 80s, in the early 80s, when this would have been about 84, so when I was 13 or 14 or whatever, it was like a dispatch I grew up in Indianapolis, Indiana. It was the 80s, like, it wasn't like the 50s, but it was strange. It was like, it was weird. It's like the 70s came to Indiana before the 60s did almost. Or something. I'm not saying it was backwards, because it wasn't, but it was a conservative place, and this was before, it was pre-Cobain, so it was, jocks and cheerleaders ran the social scene,
Yeah.
and it was sort of conventional. Things hadn't really been flipped around yet, like they were maybe in 10 years, 10 years or so, that they would be. So it was like, oh, that's the world I want to go to. I want to go to New York or downtown New York, And the cool thing was, it was still around then. I mean, obviously those people were older, it was way after that had happened, but those people were alive and they were around, and you could meet them. You could walk up to them, you run into them at the coffee shop or something, once you got there, which is pretty amazing. It was pretty extraordinary. So I think those are the kind of, that kind of impulse, that intense identification with the music. That's why one can work at a big publisher like I do and do books by, quote, cult heroes. Maybe even now more so than ever, since, everyone, what they're reading and listening and watching, everyone is in their own little taste silo now anyway. It's not like we're all listening to the same hit songs. A song could be a humongous worldwide hit, and you or I might never hear it.
Yeah.
Because there's,
especially you and I.
Yeah. Yeah, especially. Yeah. I mean, you might hear it out when you're walking around and things like that, but the whole idea of a monoculture, it doesn't really happen the same way that it used to.
Dude, I did not know you were from Indiana. That I feel like that changes everything. Because the sort of particle of ice 9 that made my sort of whole musical identity crystallize was of course seeing that the Welcome to the Jungle video in whatever 1986 or 1987, and it just blowing my fucking mind, and thinking about young Bill Bailey stepping off the bus in Hollywood, straight out of Indiana, and getting his
Lafayette, Indiana.
Yeah, so it's and my editor at New York Press had me write a piece on my sort of 10-year anniversary of being in New York, and I titled the piece on not making it because I hadn't made it at that point, or I don't know if I have yet, whatever.
Yeah.
But the analogy that I drew, I said, you should imagine a young Bill Bailey coming to New York instead of LA, because I was 21 when I moved to the city, so quite a bit later than you. But it's so interesting to find out that you came from Indiana, but you didn't move to New York until much later, correct? But you were making trips to New York at that, when you were that young, or?
Yeah, I did trips to New York because my aunt, my dad's sister, lived in Connecticut, and so I would take the train in, and that was but I didn't move there till about 1993.
Okay.
And so I was 21, 22 when I moved, and it was a good and bad time to move to downtown New York, because it was still there, but it was over real fast by 2000, almost, in a way. And then 9/11 really put the kibosh on things, and then kind of that was a real catalyst for a whole new wave of change that would take it. So you get there, you fall in love with it, and it kind of ends. And I'm not someone who's going to complain because the city changes. Obviously cities change,
Yeah,
but
that's their job.
It was like the tail end of the comet.
But when you did move to New York, when you started making trips to New York, that was still a time where you could just come to New York and track down your hero because they hung out at fucking Baby Jupiter or Arlene's Groceries or CBGB or wherever, and you could just go if you went there enough time. I remember going to Baby Jupiter like 3 times until we finally saw Mike Doty, and then we were like, well, now what do we do? And then
I did his books.
I know and I quoted one of his lyrics in my book, And
excellent.
he came to a show in Memphis and was very cool.
Right on.
Yeah, really, really good guy. And another artist that I think has sort of flown below the radar.
Hardworking guy, puts out tons of shit. He was just here. I saw him just a few weeks ago. He's doing well. He was playing a residency here in LA.
That's right.
At Harvard and Stone, improvised music. It was really terrific with a bunch of different people. I knew Mike back then. He was sort of the first person in our peer group who kind of made it, whose band kind of took off. We weren't great buddies, but we were friendly acquaintances for sure back then. His best friend, who we'd grown up with, was in graduate school with my roommate at the time then. So we kind of overlapped that way. And that was kind of amazing. So Coughing, we're really special, of course. And his solo work's really terrific as well.
That's, a lot of my friends are still in New York, and a lot of my friends are significantly younger. And I feel, I both feel bad for them that there isn't for them what there was for us, sort of a reverse Field of Dreams thing of like, if you come, then we'll build it, that kind of thing of, you just get to the city and then suffer for 18 months or 3 years, and then things will start to happen for you. Because now there is a whole sort of like established tribe and support group of young people who are trying to make it in podcasting or comedy or art installations or but that makes it dramatically easier and dramatically harder.
I bet. I just can't imagine trying to do that now. I didn't really have any talent though. So, I work for a company, you know what I mean? I had to get a job, and I'm also like Midwestern in that practical sense. You need something to fall back on, I'm not someone who lives by his wits or can scuffle like you have, or, a young artist might when they're coming, to the city. It's like, I need order. And I quickly learned that my first job, in the city, I worked for Allen Ginsberg in his office. He had 3 full-time employees, and I booked his tours and, helped put the books together and some audio things together. And that was like an incredible introduction to, downtown New York, because all these people would pass through his office. You never knew who might stop by, whether it was Lou Reed, Bono, Philip Glass, the painter Francesco Clemente, Robert Frank, Herbert Huncke, Gregory, all these people who were real and a part of his world, who you've been reading about. It turned out, they were actual people, and it was enough, the pay was decent enough to get by. He was an incredibly generous person. Pretty much any money he made went back into running that office to organize his incredibly, busy life with all these variety of projects and things that he was involved in. He would go out on tour to bring in, because he would get a decent amount, per reading. He was putting his photo archive together into some kind of, coherent, retrievable form. All the pictures of the beats from the 50s and 60s were generally taken by him. Wow. Back in the day. Any picture you've seen of Kerouac or Burroughs or any of those guys is usually a photo by Allen. If it's of a certain 40s, 50s, or 60s, or that era, or 70s even. So that was it was a really amazing time, and I don't want to be an old fart about it, but it really was.
One of the things that I think is a mistake that I have made and continue making and will make again is that I always prioritize history. And I never understand or accept that the great art is unfolding right now. The great poetry is unfolding right now. That fantastic new filmmakers are being born, and there are people who will make art who are born today. That we're shitting on because they grew up with iPhones or whatever, and they're going to make something that's just fucking mind blowing that we can't even conceptualize now. We always look to the past. We're sort of, I talk to people now and they're like, oh my God, you lived in Greenpoint? Did you go to that place like in Girls? And I was like, yeah, I fucking lived in Greenpoint. We had no other option, and like now all the people who were living in Greenpoint are now in Long Island City, or if they've been priced out of Long Island City, they're in fucking Crown Heights or Philly, or, in 20 years, they'll be colonizing Indiana, because we've been priced out of New York and Philly and DC, and, the new hotspot is Lafayette, Indiana.
That would really be something. It is a college town, but hey, you never know. Indianapolis looks pretty great these days. I was back there last year, and it's a much nicer city than it was when I was growing up. It really feels like a real city to me. When I was growing up there, I didn't see the whole place either. I pretty much stayed on my side of town, so maybe that's part of it. But yeah, there are people. I think we tend to gravitate. Maybe we look at the past so much because I feel like most people bond heaviest to the music they fell in love with when they were teenagers. The music you heard when you were going through puberty, or the music you heard when you first had your heart broken, or when you first fell in love, or first got really truly angry at someone or something. Your brain latches onto that and it never lets go. And as one ages, it gets harder and harder to experience music with that same amount of intensity, which was why it was really great to, discover Lanegan in, for me, 2004. I'm not sure how old I was at 32, I guess, something like that, which seems like relatively late to me to pick up on a favorite new artist. And, when I got into him, I don't think I listened to anything else for like 2-3 years, years. I just kind of shut everything else out for lots of other reasons too, but it arrived at exactly the right time,
Yeah.
For certain.
I will always argue in favor of the maddening, expensive, time-consuming task of sorting through all the new writing, all the new music, all that shit, because we can be lazy and let time do that work of sorting out the shit from the food, the chaff from the straw, and say, oh, these are the great artists. And it just took 20 years to for us to realize that. But it's much harder, and God, it's so inefficient to figure out who's doing it now. But I watched that polystyrene doc, and they're going down the sort of top of the pops listings, and like none of the bands above and below them on the listing, you would never fucking, if you came upon their records in the in the cutout bin, like you would feel, fuck that, and these are artists that sort of like popped and had the hit for that week or that month or whatever, and then disappeared and then never did anything else. So it's we do have to do that work. On that note, one of the things that I must grill you about is that everybody loves shitting on gatekeepers now. As an editor, you are a professional gatekeeper. How do you defend that, you monster? No, that's not how I'm going to phrase it. I feel like gatekeepers often play an important role. I worked as a bouncer in bars in New York for a long time. That is a literal gatekeeper. I kept a lot of fucking weirdos and perverts out. So I don't know. Can you talk a little bit about the appeal of being an editor? What drew you to it? What your responsibilities are? I mean, you've talked about it a little bit. Some of the people, I think people talking about Stanhope called him the world's biggest underground comedian or something like that. And and you can apply a moniker like that to Lanegan as well. Same with Dave Van Ronk. And also, like, if you're a Lanegan fan, you're not like, oh, I sort of casually got into it. It's like all the casual meth users in the world. No, if you got into it, you let it destroy your life, man.
Sure.
So I don't know, talk a little bit about life as an editor. Also, a lot of my friends, a lot of people who listen to this are themselves writers, hardcore readers, aspiring writers, people who are looking to publish. What can you tell us about what you do, and what do you want from them?
Right. Well, it's interesting term, gatekeeper. Of course, I don't necessarily think of myself as a gatekeeper per se. I think I'm just someone who kind of knows what he can make work within this framework, and that framework is book publishing, I guess. I have a relatively narrow field of it. There are editors who are much more generalist than I am. No one's going to send me a novel to publish, for example. I don't really know. I don't read them. I don't really know what makes a good novel.
I remember sending you Sam Tallent's thing. Sam Tallent's excellent novel, Running the Light. And
yeah,
I feel like your response was like, I can tell this is good, but also it's not like what I do,
Well, Robert Frost said, why would I want to be well-rounded, like so I could roll downhill? I don't know if he really said that. That might be one of those misattributed things that you see everywhere, but I think he did say that. I guess, for one thing, the gatekeeping aspect of it is something I actually really don't like. I don't like saying no. I don't like rejecting books. I don't get my jollies crushing dreams by any stretch of the imagination. On the contrary, I feel terribly guilty about it a lot of the time. It stresses me out. It's a bummer. It can be a real, sort of drag to live with, that sort of kind of perceived power. If I do read something that I have a sense is good, and I only think it might be good just because I enjoy it. It's not that complicated. It's like if someone says, I don't know what a good book is or a good movie, it's like, of course you do. Did you like it? It's not that hard to figure out. I will try and be helpful and pass it on to someone, whether it be an agent or another publisher who could do right by it, in a way that I am maybe can't. As far as how I ended up here, doing what I do with the music, pop culture, or comedian, or some actor books, I feel like in a way I stumbled into it because I came there from Ginsberg's world, and at that point I was thinking, well, maybe I can. This is how dumb I was. I was thinking maybe I can work, find work with poets for the rest of my life and make a living. I mean, good God. I thought, well, maybe all poets have like 3 employees.
The lucrative,
talk about a rube. Yeah. Talk about a rube, I mean, I knew Alan was Ginsberg.
Of being a hanger-on to poets.
Yeah. Right. I mean, an assistant or something in that world. I knew Ginsberg was famous. It was pretty obvious when I'd walk around New York with him, but I didn't realize what a rare thing that is. Even rarer now it seems. But eventually I went to work in publishing because not that I wanted to get away from his world, but I did see that it wasn't going to last forever and that I had to get my own kind of thing going that wasn't attached to someone else's life, And I mean, I went into publishing. I went in the publicity department. I took the first job I was offered, which was like being a publicist for cookbooks, and I wasn't very good at it. I mean, I was really quite bad, but they said after a couple months, like, this is not working out, but you're a nice guy. Maybe you could work in the editorial department of the children's book division. And I was there for a few years writing the back copy on picture books and children's books and things. And children's books authors, by the way, are much nicer than adult book authors. And that was terrific too. And then I'd been at that company a while, and then I eventually transferred over and started working in the adult book division, for an editor as an editorial assistant. And once I did that for several years, eventually I was able to acquire my own books, and I just, sign up, books to publish, and I just gravitated towards stuff that I liked, which was music. It's really all I cared about was music and books, and I'd always read rock bios and rock memoirs and stuff like that. And so I started basically doing books that I knew I could talk about in front of people comfortably. When you sign up a book and edit it, you often have to present a book to a whole room full of salespeople, publicity people, marketing people, and you have to do it quickly and succinctly and be able to place it in some kind of continuum that's going to make sense to them. You know, and I have in my head every music book that came out in that certain kind of area that I do. So I know where this book I want to do is going to fit in, and why we should do it. And I can talk about that, I think, in a way that makes that makes sense for them. So what I'm doing is kind of being like an advocate for the book within the company. I'm not someone who can, I'm not at the point in publishing where I can see a book and be like, I'm going to publish that and know what's going to happen. I have to convince a few other people that it's worth doing, you know? So I don't think I'm the ultimate gatekeeper. The ultimate gatekeeper is, at least in the way publishing tends to be structured, is several people, you know, making a collective decision. The editor likes a book. They bring it to editorial board. They say, we should do this book, and this is why. And these are other books that are kind of like it that did this well. That's also the comp thing is extremely important, because that's what salespeople understand. Because their reality is they have to go out and take the book to book retail and tell them, you should put this book on your shelf because, and that because has to be quantifiable in some way, you know? So, you know, once every couple of years, you can say, you've got to let me do this book. Just let me do this book because I believe in it. But you can only say that every once in a while, because if you say that every month, it ain't going to count. You know what I mean? So you have to keep those in your pocket and kind of cash them in every so often, because the person who once a month is like, this is the best thing I've ever read, eventually no one's going to believe you, because there just can't be that many best things you ever read. You know what I mean? Maybe it's collective gatekeeping. Believe me, I take no joy in, you know, shutting someone out or bumming them out by rejecting.
I was going to say capitalism is the ultimate gatekeeper. You know,
oh yeah,
and this is why I will argue in favor of editors, and this is why I will defend gatekeepers, and defend an editor's and you know, an acquiring editor's role at a publisher. You know, there are a lot of people in, you know, the online community, subreddits, self-publishing, who are like, oh, fuck editors, we don't need them, we just, you know, write our own thing, and then the market dictates its value. But we have so, you know, there are so many instances where if the market was dictating its the value of, you know, if it was just a free market thing, you would be doing like Kanye's book on hot yoga, or, you know, Malibu veganism, or whatever the fuck, you know, you would just be taking the top 3 trending topics on Twitter for that month, and that becomes a book, you know. And that isn't what you're doing. That's not what you've done in your history. What you have done is to try to find underappreciated artists that have sort of surfed below the current, but that you find that has merit, that you know, exceeds the accolades that they've gotten to that point, and then to try and bring that to a broader audience. So I mean, to say gatekeeper, I think, is totally deceptive. I mean, granted, I'm biased because you published Mark's book, and I'll be forever grateful to you for that. But you know, in the same, a bouncer, if you're a good bouncer, you'll be throwing 2 people out a night and bringing 400 people in, right? Yeah. The most important part of your job, of your role, is to choose the people you say yes to, and then yell it from the fucking rooftops. You know, I still remember with like giddy, the amount of sort of giddy, nauseous joy I felt when I was driving in my car. We just turned in Lanegan's manuscript to you, and I'd just been down the well with him. Like, he and I just been sort of bickering and fighting back and forth, and I was so worried.
Yeah, I'm sure
that it was so fucked up, and that like there was no way, you know, that you guys were going to take it, and it was going to, you know, take all these rewrites and stuff. And then I got your phone call when I was driving, and you were like, man, I don't know how to say this. And my heart fucking sank. I was like, oh, I'm just going to steer into the median. And you were like, this is so great. You know, this is so good. And I was just like, we straighten the wheel out, you know, we stuck the landing. We fucking did it, man, you know.
Not only, you stuck it completely, man. I read that, and of course I'm predisposed to like it and all of that, but I think I'm clear-headed about that. And I know I'm not alone in it, because remember how everyone who read it initially, like when I sent out for all the blurbs that we got, you know, Jerry Stahl and Michael Hall and Lucinda Williams, all these people, everyone we sent it to read it in like 4 days, which is like an incredible sign. Because when you send things out for blurbs, you often don't hear anything back. And it's probably because they start it and they're like, you put it down, and then weeks go by and they've forgotten about it. Everyone who read it was instantly sucked right in and read it fast. Everyone I gave it to in those early stages read it in under a week. And, you know, with horror and with being completely, you know, being unable to turn away from the page. You know, I was so psyched when I started reading it, because you do, it is true that you kind of know almost immediately, you know, when you have to push yourself to read a book or a certain, I'm not saying that, I mean, there are many good books that require a lot of effort, but it's great when you don't have to push yourself, when it almost reads itself. You know, you look at the page and you hear the words, and there isn't a ton of mental exertion. In fact, the only exertion you have to put out there is being able to put it down. You know, that actually, when that takes a bit of willpower, it's like, oh, I'm so tired, I have to go to sleep, but I gotta keep reading. You know, that is such a great sign. And that happened, immediately with this. Yeah, for sure. Oh, quickly though, back to the gatekeeper thing. I just want to say, for the record, I'm wrong all the time. You know, I don't think I necessarily know everything, but I've made a million bad calls about, you know, not signing up something maybe I should have that went on to do well. And I think that's any editor's dirty little secret. And we'll certainly talk about it amongst ourselves, but every editor has a long list of things that they should have done. You know, they should have signed up. It would have done well. It would have secured your job for another year to be the guy who bought in that book. You know what I mean? And it was like, at the same time, you know what? It came out anyway. It did well. Obviously, things happen the way they should for that book, so you probably shouldn't beat yourself up about it. I passed on Jewel's book of poetry, for example, because I had just come from working for Allen Ginsberg, a real poet, and I could not live with myself if I published that book, which did not work for me as poetry personally. That's a subjective thing, nothing against, but I just, you know, I didn't think it was very good. And what do I know? It ended up selling over 1 million copies, you know, which is insane for a poetry book. Even, you know, one by someone who was already having a hit record. That is insane. It probably wouldn't happen now if it came out today, of course. That was the time. There was everything lining up, you know, perfectly for that book at that particular time. So things happened as they should. But, you know, you always do remember, you know, whoops, should have done that, you know?
That's, you know, I mean, that's part of the process. You know, I was talking to somebody the other night who, you know, had a hip hop label, and, you know, we were talking about regrets, and he was like, oh yeah, you know, there was, you know, this guy we almost signed and then didn't, you know, maybe you've heard of Mac Miller.
Oh, wow.
Oh God. Yeah, no, you know, my history is littered with bad decisions like that, but also this is one of the things that, you know, when, don't get me wrong, I fucking hate editors, and I love to shit on editors, and I love riling up other writers to be like, fuck editors, but also we're all human beings, and we're working in the pursuit of art, of narrative, of literature, of storytelling. We're all in this game not because we get a new Porsche every year, or because of all the coke you get for being a poetry editor. You know, these are all people who love words, who love language, who love thinking about language and stuff like that. And as writers, how fucking lucky are we to have editors to hate, to have a human foe like that to engage in battle with about the importance of literature and writing and storytelling and stuff like that. You know, you know, we're all whether we're on one side of the fence or the other, we're all in it for the same reason, which is that we love it, which is that it's meaningful to us.
It's kind of a calling. You do it because you get obsessed with it when you're young and you can't see yourself doing much else. You certainly can't see yourself getting an MBA or something, or doing something with numbers. One of the hardest things when I work with a lot of musicians and things like that, one of the hardest things to give they've dealt with the record business so long that they're kind of used to a really adversarial kind of situation, right? And like the one nice thing about publishing is that most people in publishing are pretty nice people. You know what I mean? They never got into it to get rich, because you want to talk about that is seriously barking up the wrong tree. I'm not saying there aren't some really well paid people in publishing. There are, but the rank and file, it's not necessarily it's not going to be a lucrative thing. If it gets anywhere remotely near it, it takes a very, very long time, at least, a couple decades of hammering away at it, and publishers also, unlike record labels, don't have a long history of ripping people off, of hiding costs and charging things back to the artists, and not honoring contracts and things like that. Like, it's a pretty honest business for the most part. I'm sure there's been maybe some people would completely laugh if they saw that, but I don't think there's a lot of hiding of royalties. I think most things are relatively transparent as far as publishing goes. Publishers are not looking to fuck authors over by any means. Everyone obviously wishes there was more money for everyone involved. Obviously, it's an extremely tough way to make a living, but it's also, it's not easy to sell books. It's an old form. It's harder than, well, actually, they're doing better now than they were several years ago, but there's a lot of things competing for people's attention spans, and getting people to read something that's longer and more sustained is pretty hard these days. Everyone's attention span is completely, mine included, is fragmented by all this information, we're taking in. But as I said, unlike publishing, record labels do have a really sketchy history, and the music business is much sketchier. And let's face it, there is more of a culture of assholery in that world. There really is. There's a I don't know, a real bruiser aspect to it.
I've dealt with like a bunch of different record labels, and we've had contracts and stuff like that. We're talking about very, very small amounts of money here, and not once has it ever gone according to contract. My biggest relationships are with my agent, who I've never had a contract with. Mm-hmm. Wow. It's all been handshake stuff, and nice. And then dealing with Amazon and Audible, and there have been sort of like contracts over the years and stuff, but so much of it is just I trust my point person there, and I know that Amazon and Audible and that whole sort of empire, they have made some very, obviously some very nefarious, business decisions and stuff that I can't defend. And what's tricky about it is every single person who I've met over there and talked to has been wonderful, and they're obviously
right on.
Very clearly driven by love of the game.
Yeah.
Let's wrap up quickly, but before we go, Ben, I love you. I feel so grateful to have had the experience working with you, to bring Mark's book to light. And
me too. It helped having you to talk to throughout the intense experience that it was, and still continues to be.
Yeah, it was. It felt like some fucking mythic quest, and my sort of head still spins that we all sort of like took that trip together.
No doubt.
In my role as fake bad journalist, terrible podcaster, I would be remiss if I let you go without asking you about life in 29 Palms.
Life in 29, you mean what it's like?
Yeah, I talked to a I talked to a Kickstarter, or no, it was a Patreon supporter the other day who lives in 29 Palms, a little bit
Oh,
about
right on.
it. Made me, there's a Canadian sitcom called Corner Gas, which is incredible. And it's about the fictional town of Dog River, Saskatchewan. And
Right.
I feel like there is, I'm starting to think about 29 Palms as a sort of Dog River, Saskatchewan meets maybe like Tremors, or like Randy Quaid's character in fucking, I almost said Apocalypse, Armageddon is
Right.
there is some like survivalist what was Winesburg, Ohio,
Short Anderson, sure.
Yeah,
The grotesques and all that.
A survivalist Winesburg, Ohio. How is it there?
I love it. I love living mostly. I'm in West Hollywood today, but most of my time I'm in Wonder Valley, which is 15 miles east of 29 Palms, even further out in the boonies, as it were.
29 Palms was too much of the sort of metropolis. Okay.
Yeah. Well, it is kind of when you live in Wonder Valley. Wonder Valley is 650 people. It's an unincorporated area. It's completely beautiful. It's completely there's nothing there, so to speak, but there's a lot there, which is the desert and desert life and the sky and the wildlife and the vegetation that grows there in spite of the harsh conditions and the overwhelming silence and the wind, which can go completely crazy. And the rain, when it does rain, is everything's extreme, in a certain way. It's a great place to be if you don't mind being alone, and I really don't. 29 is great too. Last weekend they opened a whole new plaza walking area downtown with a big outdoor stage, and there was like a big party in town with bands and everything and food trucks and stalls and everything. I couldn't believe it. I was walking around, I was like, am I in 29? I have barely seen people walking around the streets there. So who knows? Maybe there's a new phase of it happening. It's a small town. It's supported in large part by the Marine base, the 29 Palms Marine base, one of the largest Marine bases in the world, if not, I don't know if it's the largest, but it's up there. Many thousands of people, and it's an up and coming place. I think the high desert in California is going through a lot of changes. Just do a quick Google, and you'll see, like, over the last year, a whole slew of articles about what's happening there, which is what happens to everything cool. Eventually, it gets discovered, and people who've lived there a long time start getting priced out, and it seems like that process might be revving up there, and that's concerning because it's not a process that can ever be reversed once it starts, in my experience. So the home values are going way up, and a lot of people, investors, are buying things and turning them into Airbnbs, kicking out renters. And when renters get kicked out, they can't find, the renting stock is depleting, and they can't find what's left. They can't afford, So it's going through a lot of changes, but I think it's a great little town, and I really like living there. I'm completely shocked that I do in a lot of ways, because I really thought I was a big city person and I'd probably be in New York the rest of my life. But 10 years ago I moved to California, and it's one of the best things I ever did. I started getting sober, and when I did, I realized New York was. I looked around. I was like, "Oh, wait, this is awful. I don't have any more nerve padding. I got to get out of here." I'm not saying it's not awful for other people, but
New York is New York is a fantastic city to drink and use and bottom the fuck out in, and then you wake up and you're fucking 39, and you're like, I'm dying. I've drank every free drink I could drink. I've sponged every fucking grain of Coke I could sponge. I've hurt every feeling. I've hurt time to go. Time to hang it up.
It's either that or die. That really is the stakes, the stakes of your life.
Yeah. Now I want to do another hour where we just talk about New York and being a lifer versus being but we'll continue the conversation another.
Well, maybe we'll do it some other time. I'd be down with that.
Awesome.
I'm a little out of touch with New York. I can't believe I haven't been there in over 2 years now because of the pandemic. For work, I had to be there 4 to 6 weeks out of the year for things back at the office. It's wild.
I just booked my first trip back in over 2 years. I'll be going end of June, beginning of July.
Right on.
This is a level of success my music career has, is that I had started to book a tour, and then I got an opportunity at a cat sitting gig, and I was like, ooh, cat sitting, that's far more my style.
I respect that choice. You cat sit for Mark Lanegan, don't forget. I mean, how many people can say that?
Yeah, I am a Hall of Fame cat sitter, I guess. Yeah, that's a good one to walk on. Ben, thanks so much for doing this, man. It's great to have you on. Oh shit, I gotta do plugs. I never do this. Folks, if you're listening, sign up for my fucking Patreon so I can get another mic stand that actually works, so that I get a tiny little trickle of income to do this. My Patreon, my book just came out, The Long Run, and other stories, all my digital shorts that came out through Amazon, blurbed on the back by none other than Mark fucking Lanegan. Do you need another endorsement? And Ben, text me your mailing address and I'll get a copy of the mail to you.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that'd be great.
I just did the opposite of selling merch. I just gave it away. Thanks so much for doing it, man. I totally appreciate it.
Always great talking to you. Thanks for having me.
See ya.
See you, bro. Bye.
Is catching up with friends who are arguably more talented than him.